Hi, my name is Matt Ransford. Thanks for taking the time to listen to my talk today. I'm going to be talking about how to learn to product manage in your current role. What I assume is you want to get into product management, but you're doing something different in an organization. And so what I'm going to talk about is ways that you can build up your skill set in order to move into that product management role in the future. So I manage a team of product managers at Hulu in the developer platform engineering space. I have worked at all manner of different companies in entertainment, in the nonprofit space, agency, CPG. I started in front end when the role was legitimately called webmaster, and continued through the evolution of it being called producer when no one could really quite figure it out, and it was very jack of trades, to today, where product management is a whole discipline, and there are companies that have hundreds of product managers. So what I'm going to focus on is not so much how to roadmap or how to evaluate data and make product decisions, because there are plenty of resources out there for that. But what I want to talk about primarily is how in your current role you can spend time understanding not just the business that you're in, but the way that that business works and the many disciplines that make up that business that are crucial for product managers to understand in order to bring your product vision to life. So this is what we're going to cover. Product management covers a huge range of skill sets. So whatever you're doing today is valuable. That's going to be one tool in your product management tool chest. And I'm going to talk about where you can look in the organization to find other tools. Every company has gaps that you can fill. You just need to find them. And you need to be able to influence people at your particular company to be able to fill those gaps. And maybe it won't work at the company you're at. Maybe what you can do at your organization is build up your tool set, and you can find a way to apply product management in your next job. But you can learn a ton of these skills on your own at work, outside of work, and you can even bring them into your day-to-day. And we're going to talk about that a little later on. So what we're looking at is two different sections of this presentation. We're going to talk about what you can do where you are, and then we're going to talk about what I'm calling where you want to be. So how you can learn about these other disciplines and how they relate back to product management. And to be clear, I'm going to talk primarily about software technology. I don't have much experience in hardware, a little bit of experience in CPG, no experience in other areas of product management. So I'm talking primarily about tech. So the first question is, how do I product manage? The answer is there is no one way to do product management, and no two companies will do it the same. I have been in enough places now where I've seen it really run the gamut. In some companies, product management is very specialized. You're on a team with dozens of product managers, and everyone has a very narrow, very niche slice of the business where they are laser focused. In some companies, product management is really broad. There are few product managers. You are responsible for a range of products that have a range of different kinds of customers, and you are just constantly juggling balls. And in some companies, it's really not very rigidly defined, and it's up to you to determine what's most important. And the way that you do that is through understanding the many disciplines at an organization and how they work together, in order to establish a baseline of understanding the org. So let's look at where you are today, what your role might be in the organization where you are. The first thing you want to do on your way to becoming a product manager is learn your organization. Now, here I am talking specifically about whatever organization you're in today, whatever the company is you're in today. You want to learn as much as you can about it, and you want to take the way that you learn about that organization to your next organization, because you want to learn these same things there as well. You want to know what the organization knows. Every company knows a tremendous amount of information, and you can break that down into two cohorts. You have the information that the company knows in its artifacts, all of the Word documents, Google Docs, PowerPoints, slideshows, Slack channels, email threads. All of that stuff contains information about the organization. And the other cohort is its people. And the easiest way to learn about your organization is through the people. You can certainly get contextual information and really detailed information from its artifacts, but it can be very difficult to know where to start if you just pull up the wiki and start clicking around. You really need to meet as many people as you possibly can in order to learn about the organization. And through that, you can learn about who to influence, because a very critical part of product management is influencing people internally in order to guide them to the vision that you have for the product that you're managing. And then finally, and probably most importantly, you need to learn as much as you can about the organization's customers, because the customers are paramount. That is number one in a product manager's checklist. Making sure that you're building something that your customers actually want and will use and will stay with. So 2 more things here in learning about your organization. You need to understand the corporate strategy, and you need to understand what the company's core competency is. And these are both things that you can learn today. What are the highest level objectives of the company's strategy? And how does your role contribute to that? And then think about, how would your role contribute to that if you were a product manager? If you owned a particular product that your company sold, how would you go about fulfilling those objectives? And how do you go about doing it today in whatever your role may be? The second part of this is core competency. What's the company best at doing? So for example, at Hulu, our core competency is streaming. We're not ever going to decide to get into the business of making shoes. So you need to understand what your company is good at and what their playing field looks like. Next, you really want to learn about yourself. What are your strengths? What are your strengths as a person? What are your strengths as an employee? Are you a visionary or an executor? Are you technically minded? Are you good with partner relationships? This is the sort of thing that will really help you on your path to becoming a product manager, because there's all sorts of different kinds of product managers. Not every product manager is the same or thinks the same way or works the same way. And it's always beneficial to identify what your strengths are and play to them as much as possible. If you are good with relationships, then maybe you will be best in a role where you manage partner relationships and you develop the products around partner relationships if you work at a company that has that sort of thing. If you are very technical, you could be in a space like I am, which is in developer productivity engineering, where we work on the behind-the-scenes tools that our developers use in order to build the product that our end users see. So understand what those strengths are, and also think about where your gaps are and work to fill those gaps. So if you are really good with vision but not great with execution, think about ways that you can work on being better at execution. Learn to facilitate. This one I can't emphasize strongly enough. Facilitation is such a key part of product management. So much of product management is about bringing people together, getting them on board with your ideas, convincing them to go all in the same direction that you want them to go. And a key component to being a good facilitator is by networking. So networking internally at your organization is huge, absolutely huge. It's the way that you are able to build consensus. So meet people, learn what they do, and build relationships. The goal as a product manager is to build relationships to the point at which people come to you when they want to get things done. And finally, this is a little bit of a side note, but this is one that I emphasize with everybody that works for me and for everyone who I have seen be successful, and that is meeting fundamentals. And this you can take and use whether you are a product manager or whether you do literally anything else at a company. Learn how to run effective meetings. There is nothing worse than a disorganized meeting that runs over, doesn't have an agenda, starts late, doesn't have a goal, doesn't have an outcome. If you are buttoned up with nothing else in your work life than your meetings, you will be 80% of the way there. So, very few fundamentals here. Every meeting invite you send has a very clear agenda. What are we discussing? What's the goal here? What do we want to get out of this meeting? And that goal and outcome is very clearly defined. Start wrapping up your meeting 10 minutes before the end of the hour. If it's an hour meeting, 5 minutes before the end of the half hour if it's a half hour meeting, because the conversation will continue to roll. You will always go over if you don't start wrapping it up sooner than you think you should be wrapping it up. Make sure it ends on time, and then document the recap somewhere. It doesn't have to be sent out an email. It could be in a wiki. It could be in a Slack channel. Just make sure that you capture what has happened and that everybody who is involved is able to access that information. So where do you want to be? Let's look at these roles throughout your organization that you can learn about that will bolster your skills in order to become a product manager. And the clearest one, the most obvious one, is project and program management. So this is by far the most direct path into product management. I myself started in program management and moved through that into product management in an organization some years ago. I know many people who have gone down this path. For whatever reason, project and program management has a little bit of a lower bar to entry. And so you can find your way into a project or program management role without too much relevant experience. And then you can leverage that into product management because there are myriad program managers who are functionally doing product management day to day in their roles, particularly in teams that are really overworked or have product managers who have focus in several different areas. Project and program managers are invaluable. They really keep the ship running, and there's often a lot of space for them to do product management. And so this is one pretty direct way in. Regardless, if you don't work in project or program management, you want to learn about it. So learn the basics of Agile and its ceremonies, planning, stand-up, demo, retro. What are all these meetings? What are they for? What are they accomplished? One way that you can use this in your day-to-day is by trying to get your own work done in a program management style. So make a Trello board. Trello is free to use, I think. Make a Trello board for yourself and do your work in Kanban. Learn about Kanban, learn about how you want to keep the in progress column to a certain amount of work because you know that that's the most amount of work that you can keep in the air. And then don't start anything new until you move things out of those columns. You can do that for anything in your day-to-day, and that will help you understand how teams work in that style. And you can also do this with the Agile methodology. You could try to manage one of your own projects as a sprint. Again, you can do this in Trello, or if your work uses Jira, you could start up your own project and do it there. Learning to code. So this one is kind of a favorite of mine because learn to code is such an overwrought phrase. It's something that gets thrown out constantly. It is supposed to be a panacea. It rarely is. Very overwrought. However, if you want to be a product manager, you should learn a little bit. You don't need to create an iOS app, but go through an entire beginner's tutorial. Pick a language, Python, Go, Java, Node, and work your way through the tutorial. Learn about the fundamentals of code. Look into something practical. So one thing you could do is Google Python for Business. There's a lot of really easy to learn Python out there that you can do in a Jupyter notebook, that you can feed in business data that's relevant to your day-to-day. And you can use Python to manipulate that data and gain insights from it. This is something that I do myself. You will always have data sets in your work life as a product manager, and often in other roles that you'll want to be able to manipulate. And doing that with something like Python is a great way to both learn about code and push yourself in your current role. You also want to learn Git. just learn what it does, learn the basics of it, and try to deploy something on a cloud provider. So AWS is going to be your likeliest choice. That's the most common, very widespread. You could use something like Lightsail or Copilot. You just want to cover the basics of coding something, using Git to track your changes, and deploying it somewhere so that you understand that flow, that very basic flow of getting code from your computer out into the internet where people can consume it. You need to know how engineering works. And here is an area where it's all about relationship building. So that previous slide about learning Git and deploying something to AWS, you can do that with an engineer. Find an engineer at your organization who will be willing to sit with you and show you how Git works. Take someone out for coffee or buy them lunch and ask them if they'll spend their lunch showing you how Git works. That's always the best way to learn that sort of stuff rather than doing it through a tutorial. But you really need to understand the basics of how engineering works, how writing user stories works, how the agile ceremonies work, so that you are able to talk to engineers, so that you can describe your product solutions in technical terms. You can understand what the trade-offs are, and you can understand how to bridge from the why and the what, which is what product managers own. Why are we doing this? What are we doing? Into the how. And engineering decides the how. They decide how it's going to be coded, how it's going to be architected, all that sort of stuff. But there is a gap between the why and what and how that is your responsibility to bridge. And so the more that you understand about how engineers work, the easier it will be to bridge that gap. Customer success. I hope that your organization has a customer success team, because customer success are the best. They know your customers inside and out. Meet them, befriend them, ask them to sit in some calls with customers. You can be on mute the whole time. You can be just not present. They don't even have to introduce you or anything like that. Sit in on their calls. Tell them that you're curious about understanding more about your customers, and you will learn a ton by sitting in on those calls and listening to CSM agents work with customers. Learn about NPS and CSAT, how those types of surveys work and what their limitations are. And again, you can do this through your customer success colleagues. They'd be happy to explain that stuff. They love to talk about NPS and CSAT. And through all of that, try to learn where your customers struggle with your product or your products and where they succeed. And this is really going to help you understand what customers are doing with your business. Finance. Meet the finance people. They control the budget. They are the ones who will fund what you want to do when you're a product manager. Understand how they work. Understand what a P&L is. They are also really helpful because they know how to do financial models. So as you are working on a product, they're the ones that can help you understand what it will take for it to be profitable. And they also know what has worked and what's not worked in the past. They hold the keys to a lot of organizational, institutional knowledge on the financial side of things that can really help you get quite far in your path to becoming a product manager. So knowing how finance works, really important. Sales. Sales is analogous to CSM in terms of their importance and for how you can understand how the organization works with customers. Sit in on calls with them, similar to CSM. They're a great resource for understanding potential customers and what sorts of customers convert. And another really key aspect here is learning how to sell. So another really big part of product management is being able to sell. Selling to your internal stakeholders, selling to your end users. You as a product manager are kind of a salesperson. And so if you can get time with salespeople in your organization, you can learn those skills, and that will help you when you become a product manager. And finally, marketing. Marketing is all about storytelling. They will tell you night and day that it's all about storytelling. And they are the ones who translate the story that you tell as a product manager internally. So the way that you gain consensus and get people on board with your vision, that's a story that you tell. That's a deck that you're pitching. Marketing simply takes that and tells a public version of that story. They tell the story to people who are potential customers or who are existing customers. They are invaluable for learning about how to tell those stories. So try to learn as much as you can about the different marketing channels in your org, which ones are most effective or not, how does the public feel about your brand. All of that storytelling is really important for product management. So if you spend time with folks from these different areas of the business, learn about how they work and think about how they relate back to the products that you're making, you're going to level up your product management skills kind of without really even knowing about it. So to sum up, look for areas where there's gaps at your current company. Where do you think you might be able to step in and start to affect product management? Now, this is easier said than done, right? There may not be a space in your current company. If you're at a very large company with a lot of product managers, chances are probably not so good, because the product management team will likely have most of it covered. Again, if you are in project management or program management, even in a company like that, there will probably be a lot of space for you to sort of step into things. But if you're in a smaller organization, there may be projects that you could get yourself working on that are in the same sphere as product management. But regardless, you want to build relationships internally with people who would want you on your team, and particularly the product management team. So how do you ultimately get there? First and foremost, you need to ask yourself whether the business has a role for you. And this is something that a previous manager of mine taught me some years ago, and I think about it all the time, and it's really very true. And you can take this to heart when you are looking for a promotion. You can think about this when you're looking to make a move in an organization. You have to ask yourself whether the business has a role for you. Because if the business doesn't have the role, they are not going to create it. Even if you see that there is a gap that needs to be filled and you make the case, the business might not agree. So you may need to look elsewhere, which is okay, right? Like one big aspect of work today is finding the right role in the right company. Another thing you want to ask yourself is, can you be open with your manager about where you want your career to go? Whether that is pursuing product management internally or being frank with your manager about how you want to grow into that in time. That you aren't necessarily unhappy with the role that you have, but you want to grow as a person and in your career, and this is a direction that you want to go. If your manager is really good, they will be super open to that, and they will help you with that. And if they aren't, that's another question that you might want to ask yourself about the organization that you're in, whether or not they would welcome you making a move like that or not. So that's my presentation. I hope that you found this valuable. I think if you take away nothing else, it's that there is so much you can learn about all of the different functions that relate back to product management in your current role, no matter what you're doing. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate you taking the time, and good luck on your path ahead.